Hey everyone, this is Steliefty with Clozo, and in today's video we're going to talk about how to survive Silicon Valley. So here's the deal. Over the past 10 years since I've moved from Europe to the Valley into the US, there's not been a year where I haven't met with, hundreds of founders, usually coming from Europe, that want to make it in Silicon Valley, that want to move to Silicon Valley, that want to move their startup here and make it big. And so I had the fortune to have a decade of experience, my own, highs and lows, my own journey, but also seeing all this new wave of people coming and going every single year and realizing some patterns on what distinguished the people that succeeded with their move to Silicon Valley versus the ones that failed at it. And just yesterday night, I was speaking in front of a group of European CEOs that were interested in kind of the secret of Silicon Valley and what it would take to move their companies here and all that. And they asked me this question, and I gave them my framework, what I've seen work and what I've seen not work, and what the difference between success and failure was. And I thought maybe I should share that with the world and with you specifically so you could benefit from this as well if it's a question that's on your mind. I'm not going to even go into the detail on my opinions on if you really have to move to the Valley to make it or not. It's a very complex question that we might tackle another time. But if you are interested in what it takes to move here and succeed and survive in Silicon Valley, I'll give you 3 frameworks I've seen so far that work. I'll start with the worst one, the one I don't recommend, the one I think that is a really bad idea, which is the one that I used, right? Which is just basically grinding through the pain until you make it and never ever giving up. Now that sounds like, a heroic thing to do, might sound appealing or cool or fun, might seem like the right ingredient to make someone a hero in a movie or something, but it is also the dumbest way of doing it, the most painful and the slowest way of doing it. So I would definitely not recommend this to people. The way that I survived in Silicon Valley is that, I bought a one-way ticket, I showed up here, not even having a real work visa, at least not a long-term one, and I had to figure out everything from scratch, from where to live, to how to obtain a valid work visa and be able to stay, to how to meet people, make friends, hire people, try to raise money, build a product. I'd never done a technology product before. I knew nothing about software. I knew nothing about the internet. There's many stories out there and other videos that I can link to share my story in more depth. But the bottom line is that the first 5 years of my very first startup, the reason why I came to Silicon Valley in 2007, that first thing was just a soul-crushing, slow defeat. I was emotionally bankrupt, financially bankrupt, spiritually bankrupt. And it didn't have to be as painful as I made it. And the only reason why I survived is that at the end of the day, after I realized and I accepted defeat finally, after 5 years, I mean, that company was dead after 2 years, and for another 3 years I pretended it isn't. I was walking around with that skeleton of a startup telling people, no, it's healthy, it's all right. If you just give it a little bit of food and some water, it's gonna, be vital and be back to life and succeed. But it was really a zombie startup for another 3 years until I really broke down to the point where I could not move forward anymore. And when I finally accepted defeat, I accepted defeat in that fight, but not in the overall battle, in that battle, but not at the war, right? I knew this didn't work, but I knew in my heart that I'm still an entrepreneur. I will work on starting businesses, growing businesses, and this is still an amazing place that I want to stay. I want to live here. So I had conceded defeat with my startup, but I didn't concede that it was a bad idea to be in Silicon Valley. So, I gave up on that company, but I stuck around, and then a lot of good things started happening. The second time around, I started a startup. And the things that happened well there are also the reason, the main reason why a lot of people that move to Silicon Valley don't make it here. There are 2 main reasons. And I've seen millionaires come to Silicon Valley and leave, and it's usually around the 3 to 4 year mark when they return. It's an interesting pattern that I've observed. I mean, I've seen people that sold their companies for hundreds of million coming to in Europe, coming to Silicon Valley, saying, "Now I'm going to do it big here and even bigger here." 3 years later, they go back. I've seen people that were successful founders that turned into VCs and were investors in Europe that said, all right, we're going to move the family to Silicon Valley, and for the next, now I'm going to start this, I have this great idea, I'm going to start my next startup in Silicon Valley, and it's going to be the biggest thing ever. 3 to 4 years later, they leave. And I really see them come and go, come and go, come and go. And one of the things that most people don't realize is that when you move here, besides how hard it is to start somewhere from scratch, and we all, especially entrepreneurs, we underestimate this. We're such positive thinking people. We're so so confident in our abilities that we underestimate some of the challenges that come with moving to a completely different place on this planet and start restarting there. But even if you take all that aside, the biggest thing that makes it hard to make it in Silicon Valley when you just moved here is that you don't have a network. You don't have true relationships that you've built over the years that you can now utilize and use to start your new startup. You're fresh. This is a fresh start for you, so you need to build relationships one day at a time. You don't know where to find the best engineers. You don't know where to find a co-founder. You don't know where to find investors. Your track record back in Europe may or may not really matter. In most cases, it doesn't really matter that much here. So all the people that you're meeting, and you're going to meet a lot of people. That's one of the beauties and the beasts of being here, is that it's very easy to meet and network and go to meetups and events and mingle with people. But those relationships are very superficial. They're just on the surface. They're just a 10-minute chit chat at some kind of an event. It's very hard to find the right team, the right investors, the right co-founders based on these kind of super loose, super superficial relationships. And building relationships takes time. It takes many, many hours, many, many months, many, many years to really know and have in-depth relationships. And without these in-depth relationships, it's very hard to make it in Silicon Valley. You're going to be out here, and most people that come out here, they don't know anybody. So the type of people they're going to be able to attract and meet and work with and form a team around are going to be other people that don't know anybody here, that just moved here, that have nothing better going on. All the top talent is either doing their own startup or is being recruited and hired by some startups that are rocket ships, that are exploding, that are super hot, that get all the buzz, that just raised all the money, that are exploding in growth, that have a team with an amazing track record and an appeal. So all the A-plus people, they're already occupied. They're already working with people they've established relationship with over the past 5, 10, 20 years, or they're doing their own thing that is working. So you're not able to tap into A+. And then B+ talent, all that talent is being recruited by the big companies that pay amazing salaries and have great brand recognition and are a great stepping stone on their career. So you can't get B+ talent either. So all you're left with is C-level talent. I'm not going to say that nobody who just moved here is amazing, but most people that just moved here, they either want to do their own thing or they want to join something that's already kind of growing and working and crushing it. So you're left with people that are typically, future rock stars potentially, but they are 5, 6, 7 years away from really being at their peak in terms of their abilities, their experience, their skills. So now what do you do, right? What most people do, and what I've observed many people do, and I did this, is they put together a team of C+ players, and I was probably a D- player, well-meaning, young, talented, hardworking, but just not quite there, not able to really compete at the highest level. They put together these kind of teams, and they struggled to put together really killer products. They struggled to get real killer traction out in the market. They struggled to raise money from amazing investors. It's a slow struggle. And after a few years of struggle, if you've been really successful before in your life, you're just gonna go, fuck this, let's go back and do it in a place where I know how to succeed, where I have a network, where I have brand recognition, and why should I keep struggling around here? When you're somebody like me that had nothing going on anyways, anywhere, and you're too stubborn to accept defeat, and you also have, the age that plays a role. I was 23 when I arrived in Silicon Valley, so, I had nothing going on. I didn't care about some failure. If you're 35 or 40, you have 2, 3 kids, and you already made millions, failing for 3, 4 years at a time just might be like not worth it, and they just go back. But the biggest thing that you'll need to make it in Silicon Valley is having the right network. And that's not just like knowing somebody's email address or having met somebody at a cocktail party, but really building powerful relationships so that you are able to have the right co-founders, attract the right, founding team members, hire the right talent, attract the right investors and advisors, and really gain traction by putting together a killer team that can compete in Silicon Valley. And that's something that on day one, almost nobody has, right? Let me retract that. Nobody has that on day one. So it took me 5 years of failing and then accepting defeat with my startup to then start my next startup. And why did my next startup succeed? Because in those 5 years, I've built relationships. I met my current co-founder the very first week when I arrived in Silicon Valley in April 2007. And we were friends for 5 years. He was doing his career at eBay. I was failing with my startup. And 5 years into us just being friends, hanging out every weekend, going out, going through each other's highs and lows, but not working together, but just getting to know each other really, really well. When I had nothing going on and he had an idea, we started working together and we founded the company that I'm running and that we're running today together. But a lot of the people that I hired in this company, a lot of people that were part of the founding team members at Close.io were people that I'd known for years before I started Close.io. So the 5 years of me failing at my startups were 5 years of me building relationships, building a reputation, building connections, building friendships. And that was the foundation I needed to then start a company that succeeded at the end of the day. And this is the main ingredient that you have to work with. Now, I know what you think. It sucks. I don't want to have to come here and suffer and struggle for 5 years until I can succeed. So what are some smarter alternatives to that? And I'll give you 2 much smarter alternatives to this plan. And I have 2 examples of people that have followed that path. There's actually 3 that have followed these paths and gotten to success much quicker, much faster than I did. So I want to advise you to do what they did versus what I did, all right? So mine was kind of 5 years of pain. Here are the alternatives. My number 1 recommendation to people would be when you want to survive Silicon Valley, when you want to move here, is to first join somebody else's startup. Even if you have an idea, even if you're an entrepreneur at heart, even if you know you want to do your own startup, take 2 years, 1 to 2 years, and take kind of a little detour while you're arriving here and work on and with somebody else on their startup. And the type of startup that I would recommend you to join is not one that is at 0, but one that is already taking off a little bit. Maybe 25, 30 people, well-funded, great traction, and an A+ founding team. Join that startup and go there and tell them, hey, here's everything I've already accomplished, and I'm ready to do whatever it takes to help you for the next 2 years. And then eventually I want to start my own company. If you're a very accomplished and experienced founder, find a way to be useful to them and tell them why, although you're overqualified, potentially you're willing to work your ass off for them. If you're less experienced and qualified, try to get an internship there. Whatever it is, just put your ego aside. And this is a really important point. Put your ego aside. I would have not taken this piece of advice 10 years ago for myself because I was too arrogant. In 2007, when I arrived here, if you told me work for somebody else, I would have told you, fuck you, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a CEO, I'm a founder, I don't want to work for anybody else. Well, working for somebody else can be a really smart part of you being an entrepreneur and of that overall game plan. So I would recommend you to join a killer startup for 2 years. And in those 2 years, work your butt off. Help that company succeed and build a reputation. But here's also what you're going to do in those 2 years. Learn how to build a killer startup in Silicon Valley. Build powerful and in-depth relationships. co-working relationships. It's totally different if you work with a group of people. You're going to know them really well. You're going to know how it is to work with them. And within those 2 years, you're going to find your future co-founders within that startup. You're going to find your future investors within that startup. I would tell the founders, listen, I'm going to give you 2 years and dedicate my all to you and your success. And then I'm going to start my own business. And there's a good chance that I'm going to hire a few people out of this company. There's a good chance that I'm going to approach you first to be my first angel investors and to help me get the attention of your investors in my new startup. I will be completely transparent. Most killer founders in Silicon Valley, they will like that plan. They will smile and they will be totally on board with us. So you join a startup and you learn how to succeed here. You learn from their mistakes. You build strong relationships. You build a reputation. You find your future investors and your future co-founders. And then when the time is right, when you have an idea, when you've met some people that you really like working with, when you've built some friendships, when you've settled in Silicon Valley, and it's going to take you a year to kind of get into a cultural groove, find your apartment, know where to shop, know where to go out, and where to have fun, like all these things while you're working for somebody else versus on your own pocket. And then you use that startup as a launching pad for your own company, for whatever the hell it is that you want to do next, right? Versus starting from day one on your own thing. This is the most successful way I've seen. There's one founder that came from Europe. He had sold his company for millions. And he came and he wanted to start a startup in Silicon Valley, and he was smart enough to follow this game plan. He joined somebody else for 18 months, and then he found his technical co-founder out of that startup. That startup, the founder became their first investor, and the investors of that startup became their first seed round, and they are killing it. He went so fast from being a nobody in Silicon Valley to starting a startup with a killer co-founder team, getting amazing traction, attracting amazing investors, and they're just killing it. He used the smartest game plan to do this. This would be my recommendation to all of you. That's one way of doing it. The other way of doing it is to use the time between now and the time when you're gonna move to Silicon Valley to build relationships and build a network. There's a somewhat famous founder from Berlin who, for maybe a period of 3 or 4 years, he would come to Silicon Valley. He had startups, he invested in things, he did all kinds of projects in Europe, but every 3 to 4 months, he would come to Silicon Valley and spend like a week or two here. And if you live in Silicon Valley and we're really good friends, I don't see you more than 4 times a year. I just don't. Most people here, it's a very small circle that you meet all the time, but most people, even friends, you'll see them irregularly because people here are so busy with work. In my case, I have kids. Between kids, my family, my team, my work, it's just not that much time for me to be hanging out with you every day. So for him, coming to Silicon Valley 4 times a year over like a period of 3 years, he established relationship. He established a reputation. People felt like they really knew him. He established a network. And then he had an idea that he started, again, back in Europe, but he knew that this idea and that company would have appeal in the US as well, and he wanted to attract customers here as well. So so he first just visited here, build a network, build a reputation, build relationships. And then when he had a startup that needed customers here, or had a chance of attracting customers in the US, he would come here and based on his network and his relationships, he started selling to a few customers in the US. And based on that early success and traction, he hired one of his friends as his first business development head in Silicon Valley. And then based on that person's success, they opened a small office. And based on that, they hired a bunch of people. And eventually, they had this massive marketing and sales office in Silicon Valley, in San Francisco, and a developer office back in Europe, which is a very common structure that successful European startups have. And he just killed it. But the reason why I was able to kind of transform his company from a European startup to a perceived Silicon Valley startup with a European back office, basically, or a European engineering office, is that he utilized the many years of coming here frequently and building relationships in a network. And then when he had something that needed that network where he could utilize it, he did, and he really crushed it. The third example that I'll bring in, the third way of surviving Silicon Valley, is kind of a mixture or a flavor of the first smart approach, not taking a stupid approach of just stupidity, ignorance, and persistence, which was the work for somebody else. But what that person did, again, successful founder from Europe, came to Silicon Valley, wanted to start something here on their own, and then decided to smarten up based on my advice to a big degree. And instead of joining a startup here, that was what he was trying to do. He kind of stumbled into another opportunity where there was a big, very successful kind of unicorn startup in the Valley. They were way beyond 25 people. And they wanted to open an office back in Europe, in his country. So what he did is he made a deal with him and said, all right, I could help you. So let me help you build a reputation and a network here. I'm gonna open the office in this country for you and build a team there and hire people and grow it. But I wanna work closely with the founders and the leadership management team in Silicon Valley. I wanna come regularly. And eventually in 2 to 3 years, as we build that office, I wanna be able to move here and start something, and I will want your support if I do a good job. And that's kind of the deal they had. He went back, he opened an office, he hired lots of people. He went back and forth between Silicon Valley and that European city. And eventually, he took a few people from that European country. He took the founders from that, now multi-billion-dollar startup here, and he started a new company based on some of the learnings and insights that he gained. But he got them as angel investors, he got their network, and also he got the pedigree and the branding of being the person that worked for a company everybody knows here and respects, and opening an office and succeeding for them. So he had a really strong reputation and was able to utilize that network, that alumni network of that big billion-dollar unicorn startup. So those are the smart ways that I know. The stupid ways just come here and survive. It doesn't matter how painful or slow it is. The smarter way is either visit frequently here and build a network, build relationship before you fully make the move. The other way is come and work for somebody here for a short period of time. Even if 1 or 2 years seems like a long period of time, I guarantee you, in the bigger scheme of things, it's not. Build meaningful relationships, build a network, build a reputation, and based on that, put together an A-plus killer team of co-founders, employees, team members, and investors, and crush it in Silicon Valley. All right, that's it. That's all the advice I have to give. This is based on 10 years of living here and 10 years of there's not a month where I don't meet with a European founder or multiple groups of European founders that want to know what does it take to survive Silicon Valley and thrive in Silicon Valley. What does it take for us to move here and succeed here with our startup? I hope this is going to be useful to some people, avoiding some of the crushing mistakes I've made and many, many other founders have made. If you have comments, leave them below. If you have not yet done this, make sure to go to blog.close.io and subscribe to our blog. And if you want to get in touch with me personally and ask for help, I'm always happy and honored to help if I can. Shoot me an email at stelly@close.io. Now let's go and get them.